is asked to add a definition for public transportation center, specifying that one is ground transportation. Are there any comments on that definition?
Do you want to share with me?
Not even. On page 40, this is something that I noticed as well, that it wasn't clear. You had language in here about on lots of certain size, but then you said adjacent owners could pool their lands. So try to clarify that by saying on lots or combinations of lots, and then change lots of site later in the paragraph. And then 44 and 45 are the new section that when we made the tram be a conditional use permit, it needs to have conditions, and these are the ones you landed on at the last meeting. And I'm guessing that's what your guests are here to talk about.
Now, the conditional use permit, just so we're clear, is not a decision by the ZBA, but by the planning board.
Correct.
Okay.
And I've had the input we heard just last night from the town council. I'm not going to be as articulate this morning. I was only home between the public meetings for 8 hours, so I kind of trying to get my head around this. So most of his comments were just about putting more details in the public notice, which is something that Mark had already asked me if I really had to have all those details for the newspaper. So we may kind of have two different notices so that you're not spending an arm and a leg on the newspaper notice, but get more details than the one that's posted. He also had brought up whether in a couple of places that you're using conditional use permit, flexible parking and the lighting, whether that really needed to be a conditional use permit, or could it just say the planning board has that authority? And that's something that different town councils have given different direction on over the years. I'm clear to specify it as that because it's a clear power given to you in the RSAs, and some other municipal attorneys have had a problem with giving a board authority and not linking it to some clear authority in the RSAs. There's also something called a special use permit. So I wrote back to him early this morning and brought my iPad in case he answers while I'm still here. We can talk more about it, of whether that would make sense for the meetings and maybe even for the tram in that case. It's just semantics. And we don't get back against during the meeting, then maybe you could vote to go to a second public hearing with wording that Mark and I would work out with the town attorney. Just wouldn't change any of the decision making, but just the semantics on the mechanics of it.
I would leave it up to you and Mark as to which way to structure it personally. I mean,
yeah, it should just be whatever your town council feels comfortable with calling it.
Exactly.
That's, they're the ones that have to stand behind you later.
Like the bottom line is the same process, just different ways of wording it.
Right. Yeah. So do you want to move on to the changes in the other one, or what do you want to do?
I'm not sure
or when is it appropriate to open it up for public discussion? After we're all done, or section by section?
Well, that's the discretion of the chair, whether you allow public input at a discussion of the board and when, it's totally the discretion of the chair.
What do you recommend, Mark? 'Cause I missed the last one, so I didn't get to see what happened.
It's really totally up to you. I mean, I don't wanna, sorry, I can't tell you anything more than that, but I think Carol's right. Because this isn't the public, this also, there's going to be a public hearing on whatever decisions you make today. So you can take public input now, or you're going to hold a public hearing in December. So really what you're doing now is setting the wording that's gonna go forward to the public hearing. So it's not the last time that the public can speak.
Maybe, because I need to be out there about, or hopefully 9:30, and Mark has to be too. Maybe it'd be best if I just give the overview first.
Quickly, and
Right.
then,
Yeah,
because we can still make changes.
so on the table, where's the table?
Next time.
Again, highlighted in yellow are the changes since the last meeting. Putting the residential uses back in the VCNC one, adding caretaker or manager or apartment, adding.
So is it fair to say in summary then that the uses by right in all of the different zones has really not changed compared to what the original zoning was? I mean, because the two big changes were in the VC and the C1 land, and those you're recommending you go back. I'm just trying to.
No, I think we made a lot of changes. I think you allowed a lot more,
We're talking about VC here, but that's C1.
Well, no, even C1, they're allowing two-family dwellings, which was in the original multifamily dwellings in
That's-
C1,
yeah,
which
that's
is the
just-
original zoning.
that's not changing, that's just
Right.
putting it back in from the last meeting.
Right, okay.
But, so,
So the caretaker or manager apartment is being allowed use.
just to be clear, what's highlighted isn't the amendment. What's highlighted is the changes since the last discussion.
Right, yeah,
To
but
look at the amendment, you need to look at the whole text and see what.
right, but I'm just trying to be helpful to the people that are sitting here trying to, who have not had the opportunity to read the entire text,
Right,
which is not easy to do. I mean, it's challenging every time I try to do
I know, that's why I made a mistake with the
Yeah.
meetings that a couple of people pointed
so-
out.
So I'm just trying to,
But-
you provide some summary
But I
of
don't,
where
but
we
I'm
are
not in
right now.
agreement with your statement, because I think a lot more uses were added as part of the
Okay.
amendments, really.
All right.
I mean, there's a lot of accessory uses added to the village commercial district, for example, like camps, home occupations, indoor water park, special recreation,
Okay.
events, venues, health and wellness. There's really been, the amendments do include a lot of additional uses that maybe were implied, but now they're spelled out.
Okay,
And I think that's true in most of the districts, that there's really a lot more, allowed. Especially as accessory to other businesses. I mean, and it's gonna avoid putting the zoning board in a position where they have to make decisions they really shouldn't, they really don't have a clear path to make. So on the table, again, it used to say or not says, Alpine lifts, we've expanded that language to be tram or other aerial transportation. What's an amendment would be changing it from permitted to a conditional use permit or a special use permit if we end up with that, in just the residential district. Next page added use of animals for recreational purposes with some parameters that you come up with. Added more opportunities for daycare and response to public comment. Page 4, added more opportunities for storage facilities and construction equipment. Those are all changes
Well, I
made
do
based
have
on-
some comments about some of these items, all right? Do you want to do them now, Madam Chairman?
Yes.
All right, under the caretaker or manager appointment, I don't have a problem with the concept at all, but let me just give you this is a ludicrous example, but what I'm concerned about is somebody would subdivide a piece of rec land and say, okay, this quarter acre is now a park, right? And I want to build a caretaker's apartment on this quarter acre. What's to prevent that? And I think we should allow caretaker or manager's apartments when the lot size is greater than an acre. And I'm fine with that, but I don't think we want to get into this, where we're gonna have a lawyer arguing, well, the text says it's allowed,
That's a good point.
Yeah, so my suggestion would be that we make it, the caretaker or manager's apartment is allowed when the lot is greater than an acre.
Is there something for an acre, is that just?
Nah, it's arbitrary, you pick a number.
Okay,
But it would seem to me that in less than an acre, somebody's trying to get around the spirit of
yeah,
the law.
that's a good idea.
Okay. Now, the other one is on the animals.
1 acre or more, or
Yeah, 1 acre or more, yeah. The use of animals for recreation purposes, I'm fine with this. But it's the word associated stables and/or kennels will be subject to site plan review. I think the whole use should be subject to site plan review and primarily it's to make sure that it's in compliance with state and federal BMPs. So the dilemma I'm having is stable and kennel. Suppose somebody wants to build a tent. Is that a stable? I don't know. And I don't want them saying, well, I don't have to come in and review anything because all I'm building is a tent.
I'm always so glad that you read these, really think about it, because that's also a good point. And should it say housing? I mean, my point was
Well,
kind of.
I'll go with whatever the board wants to go with, but,
What I was thinking was trying to not have somebody have to do site plan review if they're bringing the animals in and taking them
Right.
home at night. And not having to do site plan review for
okay,
the dog sled trail,
right.
but only where they're gonna sleep at night, kind of.
Well,
So what's help me get to that.
associated housing, or associating housing and/or keeping of animals on the property is subject to.
Or sheltering.
Sheltering of animals on the property is subject to.
Are you referring to a permanent structure versus?
Well, no,
No, that's
it's
his point,
the
that I
word
didn't
stables and kennels. What does that
Right.
mean?
But that's his
That's right.
point. I didn't capture the not.
A kennel's not a tent.
Well, right, and so therefore I don't have to review the tent?
Yeah.
Well, yes, you do, But I would agree with your thing that it's limited to housing. I think by state law, because we ran into this once before, that the town cannot restrict horses from roads, right?
Correct.
Yeah,
It, maybe we should actually say overnight. That's
that'd
really
be
what
okay
we're
with
going
me.
for, keeping of animals overnight.
Yeah, keeping of animals overnight, right.
Maybe that's really what we're looking at, not what they keep them in, but if,
Right.
if their
If
animals
the
are not
intent
going
is to
home
keep
at
them
night.
overnight, right.
Okay. Let's just stay with this stuff for a minute, because one of on my list was to talk more about ag. We go to page 5 of the table and look at that for a minute. I don't feel like we ended up in totally the right place on ag yet. There's a couple of things that go on in there. One is that, and I don't know if this is what you were confused with from the town council in the past or not, but you have to allow people to grow crops and
Right.
agriculture.
That's correct.
That you
Yeah.
have to allow everywhere. So I'm not sure that you're in compliance with that, with special exceptions with this first one. Normally as planners, we look at special exception as what's permitted, but you need a special exception. But the interpretation of that statute has been that a special exception is more like not permitting. So I think you'd be in a better position legally, and I have to say it with a qualification that I'm not a lawyer, but from what I read, I think you'd be in a better position legally if we had a separate line that said crops and horticulture, but permitted in every row. Make the next one be all other agriculture uses except for the raising and keeping of animals. Because there are some things that could fall in that category. A warehouse where somebody's growing tomatoes or, right? Or a cheese aging, the cheese aging facility.
That's gonna happen.
Agritourism. So there are, so this doesn't capture everything.
Right.
But I think we need a separate role for the things that state law says have to be permitted.
I agree with you. I'm surprised that we had special exception. I thought that agricultural uses, growing crops, was permitted any place.
Yeah.
And it should be permitted any place. There are no restrictions on.
So we'll
farming.
fix that, and then this next row is gonna say all other agricultural uses except animals, and then you have the raising and keeping animals as an agricultural use. We've dealt with them for recreation.
Right.
But you still haven't dealt with them as a accessory to residential. So if the question came up in another community, that's what reminded me of this, they wanted me to do a last minute change after their public hearing, because they have somebody with a half an acre who's got 4 horses and they're riding them on other people's property and whatnot. So, so it kind of made me think, well, you haven't really dealt with animals that don't meet the state's definition of agriculture. If I'm not breeding them to sell, I'm just keeping them for my own riding. It doesn't fall under the state's definition.
Oh,
of agriculture.
I thought, well, other than, you get into, we're now opening it up to allow for recreation. So if somebody wants to get horses for the purpose of just riding them themselves, I mean, I would define that as a recreational use. But,
Really?
well, I don't know, what would you do? What would you do with that one?
That's the
Our
question.
recreational is just for 8 weeks, it's not, like
Well,
I know someone who
right.
had a pig as a
Right.
pet, so
Okay.
how
So I
does
think
that
I
fall
think you maybe want to think about another category of, think about what is okay as accessory to residential. Is there a number of llamas or horses or chickens that it's just okay because that's part of having a house, but is there another number that you'd rather they come in for a special exception so that you can enforce the BMPs and make sure that the feed
Well,
is
what was
being-
more important to me was the 5 acre minimum.
Yes.
Right.
And that was intended but that, in my mind, applies to residential as well. If you've got 5 acres of residential property and you want to open a farm, you have every right to do that. Now, nobody has 5 acres that they could open a
And I
farm
can
on.
make the wording make that be true. It doesn't yet, is what I'm saying, because
Oh, okay.
if I'm just keeping the animals because I like them, it's not really an agricultural use under the state definition. But we can expand that to say
Keeping of animals, period, to me, I think that was the original intent. We were saying you can keep animals The only reason we put any of this wording in was because we were deemed by the state attorney, by our attorney, that we weren't in compliance with state law. So, I mean, up to now, we had banned animals, period. Other than dogs and cats. So, I don't think the spirit of that has changed.
Is it,
And our way to get at that was to simply say you needed 5 acres. Minimum.
so would that be for livestock, horses and chickens?
Yeah, right, particularly chickens. Because we've had people that have brought that up. I'd like to have a little chicken coop, which you can do on a half an acre.
You can.
Well, no, you can't
Well, physically
legally,
Walk every
but
day.
you could physically do it, you know.
Not legal.
Not legal.
But for all these things, you want the 5 acre to go with.
Yeah, I think the 5 acre is the
The
key.
livestock, not.
Right,
Livestock, horses and chickens.
right.
And the 5 acres can't be applied to an HDR like a condo. How does that work?
Well, I don't worry about condos because their bylaws are not prevented. I mean, if they want to allow chickens on their property in a condo, I'm not so, you know, and they've got more than 5 acres, they wanna, the board wants to do it, God bless them.
So I'm gonna expand it to include keeping of livestock, horses or chickens as accessory to a residence.
Oh, I mean, if that's the best wording, sure, I don't have a problem with that.
Well, I'm trying to make sure I've got captured your intent. Okay. Let's go to amendment number 3. And this has, used to be number 4, but we got rid of 3. And this has, the re-addition that, that Bill Cantlin had recommended. Which I agree with. They were working at cross purposes and actually giving you less density in these districts with residential uses.
So this, just again, my opinion, all right? This falls into the category of changes that I'm personally feeling a little uncomfortable with. Because I don't think we've really studied these. And conceptually, I think this makes some sense, but I thought we had talked about the possibility of taking next year to leave everything regarding setbacks and anything like that in the zoning alone for the time being. And that take a year and go through and take a look at all of these issues regarding setbacks and rules, you know, in terms of setbacks. and trying to come up with the, you know, like a set of changes too.
Yeah, I know that that's the plan to talk about setbacks. I think the agreement was except for this, what's kind of an obvious improvement toward
Right.
density of bringing this from 35 down to 20. These other things aren't setbacks. And I agreed with Bill that they're working against you in terms of density in the village, commercial and the C1.
But you know, on the surface, I don't have any problem with this. I mean, it's just that we haven't really taken a look at its consequences in any depth.
Well, except it's gonna increase density.
Yeah, but it's always the unintended consequences that I worry about sometimes. You know, are there any here? I don't know. I mean, I haven't looked at it. You know, I haven't thought about this in any great depth.
And I don't see it as instead of looking at density more next year, 7% density. I think
Well, I think that
if
point
you're
was
leaving
made.
residential in those districts, you need to take another look at
We ought to
minimum
take a look at what could we do to make,
encourage.
to encourage more development of what type, you know, that's a significant question.
Well, we still have more time for the next meeting. And
But
for that.
to just make these two changes, I'm okay with you cutting it down from 35 feet to 20 feet.
Right, that you already had.
Right.
Number one, you already had 2, 3, and 4 were added in response to comments that Bill Cantlin made that I had thought about already as well.
Do you think there are unintended consequences to the reduction of the lot size?
I don't know yet. It could be.
Do you want to think about it? We can have that
Well, I mean,
No, this is the meeting you need to decide what you're going in the second public hearing.
Good second public hearing.
Not
Because
another-
you gotta get it on paper. And then the problem, once you get it on paper, if as a result of that hearing, we can't get consensus, then nothing goes forward.
Well, would this be its own separate piece of what we're voting on, or what we'd be putting forward, so we could pull that piece out if there is still no consensus?
You'd need to make 2, 3, and 4 a separate amendment.
Right.
If you had me make 2, 3, and 4 a separate amendment, then you could drop it without having another public hearing. You couldn't, the way it is now, you couldn't, because it's part of amendment 3.
So I'm confused why we'd make this a more complicated process and not make a decision right here. Like I'm having a little trouble understanding it, because we can take any of these decisions and there are, you know, what ifs, you know, out there, but we all agree, you know, with the concept of, you know, creating an environment that allows for development to increase density. So I'm not catching why we wouldn't like sit here and make a decision. I think, you know, that's what we're paid for, right?
That's what I'm.
I would see if I could.
That's, yeah,
I
you
don't know
are
about
paid for it.
It's in there.
We'll add a zero. We'll add a zero.
What do you think? Well, I mean, I think too, I had the same similar view in that we have our resident expert here who's looked at this and considered it. I'm not sure my amateur view of these things are really going to be able to be up to snuff. If our resident expert says, yes, you need to do this in order to accomplish what you're trying to accomplish. And we lean very heavily on that expert opinion. That's why she's here.
But my thinking with number 2, I would really like to see you have a minimum density, not a minimum lot size. But if you're gonna leave single-family homes and duplexes and village commercial, I would rather see you be saying they have to put 6 or 8 units on an acre. This is totally the opposite of that, making them have a half an acre for one. It's just chewing up land needlessly that you could use for other things, maybe someday if market changes. Number 3, there's a different maximum lot coverage in here for residential than everything else. That's, again, it's making residential density something less dense than everything else in the district. The same with number 4. They were, for some reason, they were pulling out those residential uses and saying, well, in those cases, they need to look and feel more like the residential districts in a way. And I don't think that's not what I've heard you want, and that's not what I've seen in your pedestrian village thing.
Yeah, in fact.
And this would be just a first step. I mean, we'd still
You're gonna
need to
look at it
follow it
next-
up more next
You're
year.
hopefully still gonna look at it next year.
That was my understanding.
So.
What else you
What-
can do to increase density in addition to these changes, not
Yeah.
second guess these, but what else can you do to get
So
to that 6
so
or 8 units on an acre?
I'm confused. What changes are we talking about specifically?
2, 3,
On
and
a-
4.
Thank you.
Amendments 2, 3, and 4?
That's what was added that's what was added when you agreed to put the residential uses back in those districts, so that you're not
But
reducing the impact of that.
So on number 3, let's take an example. I mean, there's a lot of different statements on here, and you're suggesting that we would in fact eliminate the minimum lot size for residential uses in village commercial district? I'm confused.
Where are you looking?
I'm looking at amendment number 3.
Yeah,
Yeah.
The
Okay,
yellow one.
on amendment number 3, there's a statement that says eliminate the minimum lot size for residential uses in village commercial.
correct.
Or maximum lot. Well, minimum and maximum lot coverage, minimum lot size. maximum.
You're a number 2, you're in change 2.
Change, yeah, in change 2.
Yeah.
So I don't understand what the board is saying. They think it'd be a good idea to approve all of these right now? To make these changes into the zoning right
That's what was
now?
Yeah.
decided at the last meeting, in response to the public hearing comment. And as to ameliorate the effect of leaving the residential uses in there, because you had been gonna take them out. Your proposal had been to not allow the residential uses. in
Right.
there. This is a way to allow them, but not have them chew up as much land.
Well, then my comment remains the same. I'm not sure, so if we think through that, that means we could end up with, on village commercial land, single-family homes that basically are just the size of the lot.
I'd like to see you end up with 6 or 8 units an acre. You don't have a minimum lot size for anything else in the BC.
Right.
So you're forcing, by keeping residential uses in there, you're forcing it to use more land than necessary. Take more land.
No,
out of-
I don't have I thought we had talked about going from a half acre to a quarter acre.
Yeah, that didn't
But
go-
then now
that
we're
was-
saying none,
That was put on, the density
and I
idea was
haven't thought about
put
none.
on the back. That was in talking about a maximum minimum density. That may be something that comes out of that conversation next year. Nothing else has a minimum lot size in the BC.
Well, I don't disagree with you, in terms of, but I'm not even prepared to answer at this meeting. That's such a startling change compared to where we were. I'm not sure about what the unintended consequences.
Well, where you were, as of the first public hearing, was not allowing,
Right, I
Them at all.
understand that, and I objected to that. I think it
Right.
should have been allowed.
but
But
this
it
is,
always had been written that it was, you're allowed as long as it was a half acre. And then we talked about, well, maybe we want to increase that density, and I agree, and I don't disagree with that. And we had talked about maybe a quarter an acre, but this is going to allow an eighth of an acre, a tenth of an acre. I have to think about that, personally. But if the rest of the board wants to do that, I'm just not so sure that when we think about it, we're not gonna find there are some issues with that.
well, you're really good at thinking around these corners, so what in your mind is the reason to have a minimum lot size for residential uses, but nothing else?
So
Well, we do have it for high density too. I thought it was, if you wanted to do high density, if you wanted to do
In the
multifamily
VC
dwellings, it was an acre.
In the VC district, there's no minimum lot size except for single, two-family, and the 5 acres for animals.
In the VC
If
district.
we're talking only about the VC district.
All right.
could I just jump in for a second?
Well, I wanted,
Oh, I'm sorry.
except I wanted your thoughts.
I don't know.
Why
I haven't
is
thought
it,
about it.
it just, how in your mind is it different where residents?
Well,
use these
when you're
minimum lot
attacking
size,
it
but,
from one area, I'm just trying to look at it from the practical perspective. Do I want, I'm gonna go over to Moose Run. Do I want Moose Run, the remaining land that's left that's undeveloped, being developed as a bunch of individual single-family home sites, on an eighth of an acre per home site? I don't know about that. That's all. It's that simple. Let me get down to practical application, because that's what could happen. I'm not saying it would happen, but is that what we want?
my understanding was that would be more like what you want than individual homes on a half acre.
Well, yeah.
So how,
Well,
where's the rest of the board on?
I've got a question. Our objective is to increase density. And, we've seen the minimum and maximum, in terms of lot size, the metric we should be using. Like in your experience, what is the metric? You use the objective is to get to 6 to 8 units per acre. Is it maybe we can, make this more clear and all agreeable if we just move to that 6 to 8 acre? I mean, from your experience.
Well, I think the consensus was to talk more about that next year and do some measurements and some looking at other areas and see what that right number is. There was opposition at the public hearing from the public to the idea of having, density as well. So, I think that was a thought that needed more work, working with your developers to come out with a reasonable number that makes sense to them too.
Bill, are you implying that we would not want 1 acre, or it's a question in your mind?
it's just a question in my mind about unintended consequences of stuff you do every now and then. That's all. But that's my only, I can't give you a specific example. I haven't really thought about it.
The one that you just mentioned was that you didn't want to have a high-density property developed right next to a property that was already in existence, that was a single-family home on a 1 acre lot. Or
Well, but it's village commercial.
you wouldn't want the
zoning
two
is there.
mixed like that.
But the
Right.
zoning is there and has been there even when the buildings were constructed. The zoning has not changed. So in the zoning for BC and C, when we want the higher density, that's kind of the goal.
Right, I don't think that your objection would occur in village commercial, or would it?
That's what we're
No,
talking
that's
about.
why.
Well, in the place I'm specifically most concerned about is Moose Run.
Yeah.
Some of that's still zoned village commercial, so you're gonna end up with all the people who bought lots,
Yeah.
you know, what are they gonna have next to them?
I'm listening to that.
I don't
I'm
know.
gonna address it.
That's not commercial.
It's village commercial.
But it's been village, it wasn't zoned after.
Well, yeah, but we're changing the rules of what's allowed in village commercial. I mean, you know, I mean, there are things that came out in village commercial. For instance, I'm giving an example. I mean, the road, there's a private road that sits up at the top of Moose Run. That's a private road because they decided to take the center of the road as part of the lot size. And the only way to do that is you make the road private. So, I mean, you know, that road should not be a private road, technically. I mean, it ought to be a public road. It's, you know, and under the new rules, it could be a public road. So what do you do? Is that right? Is that fair and right to the people who bought the stuff 5 years ago? I don't know.
Yeah.
I think it's time to make a decision, Madam Chair, one way or the other.
Well, we can either decide now, or we can make 2, 3, and 4 part of a separate amendment.
Oh, yeah.
Push it on.
Sorry, but we haven't, you know, should we finish, or this is the end of us reviewing things, should we open public comment and see if we can?
No, I had a
There's
couple
another
more.
section.
So we
Yeah.
finish
I think
that
we need-
and then
Yeah, make a,
review.
And then decide on whether or not it's another section. All right, we still have 40 minutes. All right, you want to move on to the next section?
Sure. Parking, we just added,
So you were on which one now?
Amendment 4.
Amendment 4.
Parking.
Okay.
Somebody had asked that the 1,000-foot walking distance not be for
Right.
residential, so added language to that, and you asked for a definition of shared parking, that's the last page here. I kind of made up using a few different that I saw. What happens when you've been working in a field for a long time, when you Google a topic to get things you wrote, which isn't that helpful sometimes. There were no changes on lighting, and then we just dropped 2 of the rezoning. So that was all the changes between meetings. But there was one, when I reviewed the comments from the public hearing, there was a comment made that we didn't cover, and I want to just circle back to it. It had to do with making sure that it was clear PUDs could be phased. And when I looked, it says one of the conditions for approval of PUD is that the applicants intend to start construction within 1 year of the approval of the project and intend to complete said construction or approve stages thereof within 4 years from the date construction begins. So I wondered if I could ask, I think it was Bill Cameron, was it you that brought up making sure that it's clear that PUDs can be phased? Did you want to see that language in here where it says or approve stages thereof? To me, that made it clear that it could be phased.
I've only done one PUD and it was very small and very simple, so I might be the wrong person to ask. But my concern is if you take a big piece of land, like what's inside the loop road where the Black Bear and the parking lot is, and you want to do a PUD in there, which was the whole purpose of changing that, which I commend you all for doing, I think that's great. But in terms of development scenarios, you can have a concept plan for the whole thing, but in terms of having the ability to finance part of it, do the engineering for part of it and so on, you're probably talking in small pieces. And when you phase stuff, you want to make sure you meet open space requirements and pedestrian connectivity and all this stuff. And what I'm unsure is how do you build and finance and from a developer's point of view, put that together and address the whole needs of the PUD that necessarily involve additional parts of land. I agree that you gotta add it. I frankly haven't done it and I don't know how to do it. So the phasing issues, which we've wrestled with previously, are really critical to being able to actually, in a practical matter, move development ahead.
Right. I mean, in my experience, it's been just like you just described, where the concept plan is for the whole thing that shows how it hangs together and that
Right.
the PUD will meet the requirements, and then you're in front of the planning board for approval of a specific stage or phase as this. So I guess in my mind, this already was clear that it could be phased when it said or approved stages thereof.
You know more about it than I do. I think we all hope that if we get to that point, you're sitting in that chair to help us.
I don't retire for 9 years, so I'm happy for work.
Plenty of
But,
time.
Mark, do you have any thoughts on that? Or?
No, I think that's what we struggled with. Is the concept plan being approved or is the stage being approved?
Yeah.
So if the wording of the concurrence, I won't call it
That's wording
approval.
already in
of-
here.
of
That's
the
wording I haven't
concept.
changed. It
Right.
already says it.
Well, but that's what became unclear for the board was what were they approving? Were they approving the entire thing or were they approving the stage? And as long as it says stages thereof, I think we're okay. I think that language is okay.
Yeah, that's
Makes
language
it
already has
clearer,
it.
right, that makes it
To
clearer
me, it
than
was
what we
already,
had.
it's already in there. It's
Yeah.
already in your ordinance. So I
Yeah.
wasn't seeing what needed changing.
The interaction
I
of
think it was in the
concept
site plan
with
review
the
sections
stage.
that we stumbled
Right.
across this.
Right.
And it was a misinterpretation. I mean, it's like, somehow what didn't, it was not clear what we approved.
Right.
And even when you looked at the resolution that said, we grant you approval for such and such, that was, that particular motion that passed was unclear as to what it said.
And it used to be the select board, right? Not the, it's one of the.
Well, it wasn't a
changes
PUD, it wasn't a PUD in the other,
And in the other
case
case, it wasn't
that
a
we struggled with.
PUD, but
It wasn't a PUD.
it's the, and we are untypical, I think, of many towns. Because we're very, very small developments, so somebody, like Bill says, and I agree with them, the problem is the bank wants to minimize their risk. You don't want to commit all the land to some concept that may not work out. But you've got to deal with the fact that they can come back in and say, well, I'm not going to do what I originally thought I was going to do. I'm going to change it to this. That's the real world.
I mean, generally, any subdivision or site plan can be phased. And to me, this makes clear that the PUD can too. So I wasn't sure what we were looking for.
It sounds like, I wasn't here at the time, but it sounds like it's more of a process problem as opposed to
Well,
a language problem in
Yeah.
the ordinance.
It's making
Well,
sure
something
that,
to look at when you look at your summary.
yes, it makes, the issue is to make sure that the site plan review regs match the zoning that is allowing phased development.
So,
And figuring out how to word the site plan review regs so
Yeah.
that it's clear.
so would you like to see some more, this articulated more? Would you like to see a little paragraph about phasing? Would that be helpful?
Yes,
And
it sounds like it would be.
you'd be able to tweak the wording of it at the second hearing, but not the substance, basically. That's
Sure.
okay.
I think so.
Sure.
All right. A ground truth that would Bill, if that's okay too. I think, I think that was the end of my list. Again, the lawyer, I haven't heard back from him yet.
No, we haven't gotten it.
But I mean, it was just, his comment was just about, his thinking was that the conditional use permit in the, I think it was parking and lighting, didn't really need to be conditional use permit. So I just, let me work out the semantics or mechanics of that with him. Bill, did we cover all of your concerns? Sure.
Well, I
I'm not
just
finding
had,
your list now.
and it's really unrelated, back to, it was a previous change and under the definitions of dormitory. I just didn't pick it up last time, that statement limited to program participants and or staff. The definition of dormitory, I don't think needs that in it.
That was pretty, the consensus of the board was pretty clear on that.
Yeah, but it's, our definition of dormitory goes back to when there was such a thing as ski dormitories, and I believe we had a discussion that the north face, the lodge, is basically meets the definition of dormitory, but is not a sports institute. This statement comes from where we talked about sports institutes. If they build a dormitory, then it's got to be restricted to program participants and or staff. I don't think a general dormitory, if somebody wanted to build one, should be restricted. How would you, what does it even mean to restrict it to program participants and or staff? It's open to the public.
Well, but the issue was, I think, with Snows Mountain in particular,
Right.
special, that if there's a dormitory built there for the students,
Right.
it couldn't be rented out in the summer to just whoever wanted to go there.
So you're allowing it.
I completely agree relative to sports institutes.
So you
This
allow it-
doesn't say sports institute
Correct.
dormitory, it says dormitory, period.
You're allowing
General.
it right now as accessory in the BC, C1, Special Civic, and Snow.
I thought it was originally, it was allowed.
Well, not originally,
in-
but what's in your proposal right now? So the reason for that definition was to separate it from other lodging, which wouldn't be an accessory use, but a primary use.
But isn't a dormitory always associated with some other institution or organization?
No, I think going back to when this stuff was originally written, ski dormitories were part of the skiing industry.
Think the difference.
People used to have dormitories.
The difference
And you could go and rent a room for a night, be male only.
The difference really is the difference between that and say a hostel, which is
Right.
which
Or a
is
hotel.
lodging, which is a different kind of use.
I think that's what we were trying to do, is separate dormitory from some other form of hotel.
Right. It's what makes it different. And
Well,
what makes it
it
accessory.
different is the common social and sanitary facilities and common cooking and dining facilities.
That's a hostel.
That's a house.
Well, yeah, but that's still in the definition of dormitories.
Correct.
Right, with the addition
But if
of
you
the-
take out the language you want to take out, now it's a hostel.
Well, do we have a definition of hostel in here?
No, it would just fall under lodging.
And do we ever use the word hostel? So I don't, if somebody wanted to quote build a hostel,
And it would be permitted in the BC or C1.
and we use those words hostel.
No. But you would be describing lodging is my point. If you take those words out, now you're describing.
Yes, right. That was the
Lodging.
original definition, was describing a type of lodging.
Right.
And you're saying it shouldn't be just a type of lodging. Then why don't we call it the sports
Bill,
dormitory?
I'm not,
That's too specific.
I'm not saying anything. I write what the
No, I
consensus of the
understand.
board is.
Well,
I'm
then
trying
to
to
the
explain to
board.
you the difference in the language and what effect it would have. If you take that language out, you're allowing lodging in the SC and Snows now.
Yeah. All right, let me just take a minute and take a look and see where it's allowed. Dormitories, it's accessory use,
To make dormitory clearer, might you say, even more occupants attending a multi-day program? Because it is a little odd to say limited to program
Right.
participants or staff.
It made no
without saying
sense to me.
There's attending program,
what program participants are there?
so really it's people attending a program, that's what a dorm is, as opposed to a hospital, which is
Right.
everything. So
Works for
I
me.
think that's the missing conceptual piece.
You wanted to allow staff too, right?
Yeah, but they're,
Yeah,
or participating in a program, but, you know, I mean, they're in a program.
I think that's acceptable.
that worked for me.
Only.
You know, in terms of that language, I mean,
In a
because
multi-day program.
right now, we're taking the old language of a general purpose dormitory and trying to say it's now a little more restricted, and it's unclear to me what's restricted. It's gotta be limited to program participants. That's only the case if it's part of the special snow zoning
They're
area.
not anymore. This
No,
passes.
right.
So is that gonna clarify it for everybody?
Is that gonna, yes, I think what she said would clarify to me.
Limited to participants and staff in a multi-day
So if the program was hanging out with a group of friends and playing beer pong, that would be a good program.
Well,
You're throwing it out there.
I'm back to the original intent on the Snows Mountain zoning was that they were not gonna compete with the lodges for regular guests, right? So they couldn't, for instance, rent rooms at night on the weekends to members of BBTS to fill that dormitory.
Yeah,
That was the original
Right.
agreement.
Regarded. I think the idea was to expand that opportunity for dormitories for participants in these other districts. So the question is how to make it clear. I'm not sure why it's 8 or more occupants.
I have no idea.
Maybe that's an addition.
I mean, that's, you started with that definition. Is that, would that go? Probably.
Changes.
So the dormitory, the building or part thereof is being.
What page is the dormitory on?
Page 3.
Page 3, okay. Dormitory, accessory use in VCC1. The old North Star Inn, I believe, is a dormitory.
Like the owner.
Well, I think that's what it's classified as, the old North Star Inn. Basically, it's being used, correct me, Tim, it's
But we
being
rent
used
out.
for your employees, right?
We use it for both.
Yeah,
We use it for both as employee
and
housing. We also-
it was originally built as a dormitory, under the definition of dormitory. And then it was converted partially to condos. And my question is, why is it an accessory use on that lot? It's the principal use. Well, I'm just raising it. I don't know what to do with it. I mean, it's not worth, fighting over. I mean, because, is anyone gonna build another one? Probably not.
I think a lot of these changes we made, thinking what would be ideal and, you know, a dormitory as an accessory use to a program was what we were looking for, right?
Yes.
So that's how this came to be.
Apartments for what's it, program.
Right. Or is it?
So the primary use of the land would be a program of which a dormitory is allowed as an accessory use.
Yes.
Workforce housing is encouraged.
But it's not a dog.
Yeah,
That's the way you're
something
using
else.
it. It's for multifamily dwelling.
Right, we're gonna be losing Tara pretty soon. Keep going through, or
Yeah,
is there a resolution to go?
Taking out the 8 or more occupants and clarifying that it's for participants in a multi-D program. That would apply to the staff too.
You want to say for multiple occupants. Some, that concept, you know, just kind of looked up the definition, which said a large number of occupants as opposed to 2. Otherwise, it's not really a dwelling.
But isn't it an accessory use you want to allow even if it's for?
I guess so.
I mean, some of the sports and music kind of camps don't have always allowed.
I mean, like Piano Monster Camp, they have 2 of them. Music camp.
I think when you're overrun with one person,
Right.
Yeah.
rethink it then. So that was everything that really.
yeah, those are the only ones that I noted at this point. Because every time you read it, you know, you come up with something
Oh,
else.
yeah, totally. And with me working for multiple towns, every time I read another one, oh, they should do that too. So that's the end of my list.
So let me just ask a clarifying question. We had, used to, in the old zoning, have a statement that there was something called the retail exception.
Mhm.
Where we said there was no setback requirement for retail, all right, if it was built in BC land. Is that in or out?
It's replaced by making the PUD smaller so that any use could have the exception, could have no setback, rather than just retail.
So you would have a retail and then a restaurant and then retail, you know, with consistent setbacks with the PUD.
Okay, and answer my question.
So do we need to circle back to?
Yeah, sure. If we, you think we can tackle the 2, 3, 4 now while we have Kara?
What?
Let's get that done.
Why don't I just make it a separate amendment? And then we can decide at the second public hearing. It's easy.
Okay.
Then everybody has a month to think about what, if there, you can think of any unintended consequences.
Is there anything else?
No.
Then I guess we can open this up to public discussion.
Great. Can I kick it off? Thank you. First of all, I wanted to show that we support this and we want to make sure that we can expedite it. That's the reason we came today, so that we don't have to wait for the next public meeting drag this into another public meeting. The reading through the conditional use for an aerial tramway and it only being in low density and high density zoning areas, I believe that it's unnecessary due to primarily, actually, Bill, you mentioned it earlier. You mentioned that you're not worried about the condos having chicken farms because the associations would regulate that. Many of these conditions that are inside of this conditional use are highly regulated, as I state in my letter. The the conditions of having air rights, that's a legally binding agreement that you'd have to have over all landowners that a tramway would pass over.
Right.
The need for the tramway board. You can't operate a tram in the state without, consulting with the tramway board. So they're definitely an authority. Not to mention national forests, if it touches national forest lands, then we go into a whole nother, public scrutiny over all the project. Because they have to actually put it out for public comment for 60 days, 90 days, depending on, and Dave, you can probably correct me better, but depending on the development that you're doing, you have to change all sorts of use permits. So there'd be a lot of opportunity for the public scrutiny there. And the property value, to say that it's going to increase or decrease, there's so few of these in existence. And there's people who thoroughly enjoy being directly next to the lift, and there's people who want to be a little bit further away but want to have that amenity close to them. And there's people who would absolutely hate being directly next to a lift. And they would never live in a town where they would have a lift leading up to the mountain. Understandable, that's personal opinion, but I don't think we're going to get a really great statistical analysis of saying that's increasing or decreasing property values. And so those are my major points that I wanted to put here. I brought some people along with me just because we were all concerned about it, and we wanted to make sure that we get the wording right before it goes to the next public hearing, and then we would drag this on longer. So that's all I'm trying to do.
Just a couple points. The town attorney was fine with the language, just so you know, this isn't a section that he had any comments on. Generally, in planning and zoning cases, the issue of private property is only utilized if a landowner has real documentation of a change. It's not that they come in and say, you're gonna lower my property values. They need to prove it. The burden of proof is on the abutter who's trying to say that, and they need to have actually hired an expert and spent money and done research. So that's generally how that's dealt with. And I think, in my understanding, the board's, thinking is it's not just the property that you're going over, but it's neighboring property too. Those owners have no say without some extra step. It may make sense to make, and I was hoping he would look at his email first thing this morning. I asked you kind of hearing what he thinks of making this be called a special use permit rather than a conditional use permit. Another thing the planning board can do that might sound like less burdensome. I also wanted to make sure that I captured all of the board's concerns in this noise, lighting, hours of operation, and privacy. And the reason to say something like you have to have your DES permit, or you need to have your DOT permit, or you need to have your Tramway Safety Board permit is that it gives you some enforcement power locally. And you get the opportunity to have the material that they used in the application as part of your application as well. So that's more information that you have. And you're in the loop on any conditions or requests that those permitting agencies made. It's redundant on purpose.
Should we say that instead of, you need to have an approved New Hampshire Tramway Safety Board permit?
I purposely didn't say that because
Okay.
if they fell out of compliance next year, this gives you still some teeth. Now they're violating the zoning ordinance.
Okay,
I think, Bill just made a good point that when we're developing a piece of land, we don't have to go in and prove to you that we've acquired the wetlands permit, the alteration of terrain permit, all the permits that we require to develop a piece of land. So
Then you,
do we have to?
I've never,
Prove
I've
it.
never
They're not
heard of a
supposed-
town not
not for-
requiring that as a conditional site plan review or subdivision.
You have to have them, but they're not delineated or mentioned in the regulations.
right.
You know, but for some reason, you
Well,
think
it
when
should
you have
be.
a tramway,
They should,
they
be-
should be
they
delineated.
should be mentioned in the regulations, and I think down the road, that we might be having some conversations about updating the
Another-
town regulations.
Another thought of this is other ski areas in other areas, like I used to work at Crotchet. I never had to present them with any of my permitting pieces of New Hampshire Tramway permits or my inspection reports or anything of that sort.
Was that for a ski lift? Or was it for something that was gonna pass over private residential properties, public
We
areas?
didn't have them passing over private. There was,
I think
we
that's,
came really, really close to a lot of condos.
but I think that's,
That was
my-
kind of the point.
my understanding, that's the board's reasoning for having this in the LDR and HDR is because it's not like a ski lift that's just in a ski resort, but going to pass over and buy some private residential property.
But, I'm sorry, if you have to get the permits anyway, why is it onerous to bring them as part of the review?
Because it's an extra step for one, which I believe would deter developers from wanting to do that. Number one, it puts it to another level of scrutiny. We're already scrutinizing this. A proposed project like this would be highly scrutinized through all the different forms. To add another level to that, to add another piece is another piece that we'd have to get through, which would add extra cost, extra development time, all of that. Number one. Number two, in order to attract a developer, in order to try to attract a developer to come in to try to do this, we need to show that we're very accepting of this, that we have talked about this, that the town has had a rigorous discussion, and I believe it had to have happened back in 2011 when we did the master plan, and we state in the master plan that we want to have one, that we want to work with a ski facility, that we want to do this. So that, with all those facts, it just seems to me that we're making it overly burdensome for a use that is already very complicated to get through.
My thought was just that, yes, everyone does want one, but if it's a matter of just photocopying and get the permit and sending it to town
So,
hall, I don't.
Another point to that is the way that those all come together. We got to understand that the first thing that we have to do as a ski resort is we would have to propose anything like this to National Forest, because National Forest, especially if it goes into the National Forest. Now obviously it's going to go into National Forest. That's the point. But we'd have to adopt our permit boundary. We'd have to get a forest amendment. This is years of work that we'd be putting into this. And to have something in the end that would prevent us from being able to move forward would be, another risk. And that additional risk could be, the factor of them wanting to be here or them wanting to be somewhere else.
Tim, could you discuss the sequence of, in your mind, as best you can, of how you would go about doing this? Because it is a multi-year kind of thing.
Yeah, it's big.
So which is the first you'd go after, the Forest Service?
The Forest Service. And
then what after that? You want the town's permission?
The thing about this is that the town has already done a lot of the legwork behind this in the past. As you dig into this issue, you can find a lot. I had Anna McIntyre pull me aside at Columbus Day and have a long discussion with, that they went down these roads a long time ago, and this is what they found out, and this is what, so the first place to start is obviously getting town consensus that this is, this is what we want. This is going to be an added benefit. I think that's why we're all here today, is because we all believe in that. And so we've got that. And that would be the first place to start, because you don't want to start a project that you're never going to finish. And if everyone says no way, we don't need it. Then the project goes to the idea of national forest, because we're dealing with
Right.
the U.S. Forest Service, and that is public lands. And in that system, Dave, you're better at this than I am because you're the one actually doing it. You got to change the permit boundary.
Requires a new permit. and,
Requires a new permit, probably fees and everything else involved, right?
Generally, what they do with a master plan, the Forest Service, is they'll accept a master plan. Things like, is it in a wilderness boundary? They just go through the checklist and is it feasible? No environmental work is done. That's to accept that master plan. And then the next phase of that is to do the environmental work on the site-specific project
Right.
that we want to propose. In this case, what we've done with our master plan proposed is whittle it down to what's the minimum that we have to do for this project. We have a full build out, but we'll propose the tram basically, and what's the minimum that we have to do with that. Anyway, that's out there a little bit, but I think we can all speculate, and I can certainly, that the Forest Service is going to ask us, well, do we have approval with the town? I think that will come sooner than later. So that's what we're trying to get through.
Okay.
So then after that, then it goes into the EA, environmental assessment.
Yeah.
And then once it goes through EA and we get to, I think they said 60% of the way there, they go into acceptance of the project. Isn't that what?
That part I'm not
Thinking about
sure
that.
of, but it goes through an environmental assessment.
And then public scoping.
Yeah, there's public scoping all the way through this.
Mark,
So is the request, are you okay, Nancy, with me asking this question?
Yeah.
So the question is, are you looking for site plan approval before you have anything else? Because you need
Sounds
to
that way.
be able to tell the Forest Service that you are done with the town?
I think we should have some sort of middle ground there conceptually.
Well,
You know,
there
that's feasible. I
are,
don't
you
think we
can
go through
bring a
permits and
conceptual
whatnot
plan.
before we cut them all. It all has to happen at the same time.
Tara, correct me if I'm wrong, there is a process that in the site plan review regs where you can bring a conceptual plan and have a non-binding vote by the board, right, of the concept? Or how would you do that? Or would you want total site plan review to be done?
It's not, well, you just kind of contradicted yourself, non-binding vote.
Right.
Anything on a conceptual
Well, no,
plan is
I'm just saying
non-binding.
in the regulations, what does it say? What would we need to change if you're looking for,
You don't have your regulations in front of me.
because he's saying
But-
conceptual plan,
But
but
you, but
I
it,
don't think our regulations allow for that. I think
there's
you
no,
either
there's no such
approved or
thing as a giving your approval to a conceptual
Right,
plan
that's
that
what
lets somebody
that's
have
my
confidence in moving forward, because it is non-binding.
That's my point. That,
It used to be, years ago, you
Right.
could approve a preliminary
Okay.
plan, but you can't now, so.
so in
Somebody
essence,
can come in with a conceptual plan, the board's all fine with it, but when they're ready to go, there's been changes on the board. And now the board's not, that,
right, so my point was they would need site plan review. And that's what you're asking for is don't make a requirement of the site plan review or the process to include pre-approval by the Forest Service because you need it the other way around,
correct.
is what you're saying. So I'm just trying to,
Yeah,
I would agree with them.
but this
I would
isn't
agree
site
with
plan
what he's
review.
saying, that we shouldn't make it, that he doesn't need a condition, he doesn't need a permit for a tramway board or from the Forest Service, because he's trying to get this approval done first.
right, that's,
So,
Right.
so first of all, this isn't site plan approval, this is like getting zoning board approval, but we made it easier by making it from a planning board. And one reason I said the proposed use will comply with our requirements rather than you have to have the permit is that you could issue the conditional use permit and make one of the conditions be
Oh.
that they have to have the air rights? Can I make one of the conditions be that it complies with the requirements of the tramway board? Can make one of the conditions be that it has Forest Service requirements?
Now,
Yeah.
You
can
could,
we,
if there were a lot
Yeah.
of concerned
Because you
abutters,
have
you
to
could
prove-
make conditions have to do with hours of operation.
could we make the conditional use permit, would it be at the discretion of the planning board to say, you've got 7 years or 8 years to do this? Because it also sounds to me like this is gonna take a long, long time. So, so our normal 3-year window and the approval goes away isn't gonna work in this case. I mean, we'd have to grant them some period that's a reasonable period to try to get the Forest Service and the tram board and all these other people lined up.
But that it's not in perpetuity. That's all
Right.
he's saying, is it just, it
Yeah,
has
I don't
some
think we should do it in
expiration.
perpetuity, but I assume we could do that as part of the conditions. We could override a condition.
Let me ask the town attorney how he'd wanna see you deal with that. I don't know why a conditional use permit would expire.
Right.
Why wouldn't it be just like a special exception that would go with the property forever? I don't know that it would expire.
Well, maybe it can't.
Well, because what you're doing is taking input from the public, and you're saying it doesn't create a nuisance. Does that right stay there forever? I mean, you know.
Yeah, usually.
Yeah,
If it's my casino, yeah. It stays there forever. The building permit, they would expire, the
suppose the
site plan
abutter-
review would expire, but that right to have the use would not expire. That's what I think. I'll check with the
Okay.
town attorney, but
Is that the same with the master plan that Tim references? That there's not an expiration on that as well?
Well, that's their master.
Yeah.
the town's master plan doesn't expire, no. But
Okay.
it's recommended to be updated every 5
Yeah, it's a
years,
question.
But
I
it
don't know how that works.
depends on what,
Revise it.
it just, it
2011.
5 to 10. Yeah.
Depends.
5 to 10.
And that's
Not
in
in
that
the-
Forest
It
Service.
depends what has
5 to 10.
changed around you and how
the-
fast the world is changing.
The intent of my question is that, and I don't know how it works, is, in the master plan, the town has said, yes, this is something we want to do. So that doesn't expire. And then the next step is this
Conditional use.
conditional use approval with whatever conditions. Okay.
I just
If
want
it
to,
goes over to.
I just want to make it, I mean, it would be a lot less ordinance, sorry, my words. It'd be a lot less hard for ordinance, thank you, for the board to have it a right by use because, and I don't think we need to be, we don't need to be scared, for lack of a better term, of the possibility of a tramway coming in and not having enough public scrutiny of that tramway. Because, I mean, first off, as soon as we get through all of this, to go to the National Forest and have a master plan, that goes through a ton of scrutiny right there.
Correct, it does, but there's no opportunity for the neighboring landowners
Yeah, there
in
is.
those residential districts that it's gonna go over as opposed to.
Oh, yeah, there
Forest
is.
Service.
I mean, everybody in that zone right there can at public comment, they can comment
Well,
to
they
the.
comment
comment,
as public, but not as specifically about the impacts on their private property.
But they have the ability to have their comments heard at that point.
It's different than having standing in a butter.
It's legal standing.
It's very different. They don't have an appeal, they don't have standing appeal. I wonder, if the board would like to see this as a separate amendment too, and let the community do it. If you don't want, if there's opposition to it generated, you don't wanna lose the rest of that amendment, that's the cleanup of the ordinance. change of use, if that's the most controversial one, then I recommend having it a separate amendment.
Just look at it from another direction. If it was just permanent across the board, what would that mean as far as, you know, these things that go? Is there any recourse for someone who feels that their property is unduly, whatever?
You know, in my mind, that opens the door to more of a burden for the developer because you can have the private lawsuits and you're more apt to have private lawsuits.
You're gonna end up there anyway.
You're gonna end up there
Well,
anyway.
Not, I think it's,
Well, if somebody wants to, if somebody comes to the board and the board makes a decision when it's approved, they have a right to go challenge it.
they have a
in
right
court.
to appeal, but there's
Absolutely.
at least been a process that can mitigate some
Right.
concerns.
And hopefully take care of it before.
Right.
But that's to the benefit of it.
I mean, that's why we have zoning as opposed to just civil court.
I think this conditional use permit might not be a good idea, and that part of what this says is the proposal will not result in the diminution of property values or cause a nuisance, blah, 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 blah. And they've got to come to you for the conditional use permit. So Tim or whoever else comes in, they make their presentation, and John Smith comes in and goes, I've been coming here for years. And I come here, planning board, because this is the serenity that I find from my escape from living in the city and my job. And now you want to put an aerial tram that I have to see every time I go down to Wendy's to get a cup of coffee. I am so upset. I tried to sell my property to my brother-in-law,
Right.
and he won't pay me anything for it.
Right.
My property is not worth anything. Okay, you
That's
listen
what's
all
gonna
that
happen.
and take that. Someone else stands up and says, I can't tell you how excited I am. This is a game changer for the valley. We're gonna end up with another place to have breakfast. This makes it exciting. This is gonna make it my home for my children and my grandchildren, and you're moving this valley ahead. You, the planning board, what are you gonna do?
Make a decision.
Make a decision.
That's what
You're gonna make a decision.
Yeah.
And guess what? It's an arbitrary decision. You can say people have to bring in this stuff, this analytical thing. And I can go hire an appraiser, and this guy can go up and hire an appraiser. It's another 60-month delay in the decision-making process. Why do you want to put yourselves in that position? Because then you make a decision, and if someone wants to get enough money, they're going to appeal it, either to the ZBA or to the court, whatever they have to do. Why do you want to put yourself in that position? Make it a use by right. If it gets legal, it gets legal. But putting this conditional use permit in here, which I think has the ability to be very arbitrary, puts you folks in a bad position. If that's where you want to be, think about that. But I guarantee you, that's
But
going to be the
eventually,
argument.
you're gonna have to put yourself in that
That's
position
right.
anyway. Because
Right. So why do
you're
the
gonna have to
conditions?
do site plan review at some point, right?
Right.
And at that point in time, you're gonna take a butters, and a butters is gonna get in there and say, this is ugly. I hate this. Don't do this. So you're gonna have to listen to that input.
But this argument here, the
Right.
property value argument is at least going to start off arbitrary. And then people start hiring appraisers and going to try
Well, I
to dig up
guess-
all the information on that. And there's not going to be good information.
I think it's not a question of arbitrary. I mean, I think as a planning board, we're guided by the master plan. And the master plan, it says specifically that the health of the ski resort is absolutely critical for this town. The town would be devastated if, for example, the ski resort were to close.
Sure.
So I would think that the planning board, and this is just who knows who's gonna be in the board at the time, but I think the planning board, as a general rule, would be predisposed to issuing a conditional approval or permit, conditional use permit, I guess, right? There's no guarantee, and I understand what you're saying. But I do think it's our job to take those comments, arrows, brickbats.
But don't we do that in site plan review?
Absolutely.
So the
Yes.
question becomes, why do it twice?
Right.
You're not gonna waive site plan review. At some point in time, he's gonna have a specific plan. All this is basically saying he has a right to do this. And I kind of agree with Bill, you know, that right, he's got a right to do it. We're saying that. In site plan review, we can turn it down because too many abutters came and said, I think it's causing a diminution of property values, or I think it's creating an eyesore.
No, it's really tough to have turning down a site plan for the use upheld, because if the zoning allows the use, you have to be able to say it's not complying with the site plan regulations. You can't say it's a bad use in that spot. You need to say the lighting isn't right, or it's too noisy, or you need screening, but you can't say it's not an appropriate use in that spot at the site plan review stage. Because the zoning's already said,
Well,
it is.
that's the question. You're saying it should be reviewed now and not reviewed in site plan review.
not questioning whether or not it can be in that location by the site plan review stage, no. I think it would be good if you look at the purpose statement and make sure that that says what you want. I mean, I generated this, I'm not you, I don't live here. I try to make clear that the bias is on the side of the tram.
I think what Tim is asking, by have his attention, that you want use by right.
Correct.
End of story.
Which is what
it is now.
This is changing.
This is changing.
The conditional use permit.
Or a special use.
Right.
That's the reason that all you people are here.
Correct.
It's use by right or.
Keep as is. Keep as is and make this change.
It currently is a use by right.
Well, a ski lift is, you don't
Yeah.
talk about
Okay.
a tram and.
So why would we change use by right?
That's my question.
Because the board, at the time we looked at this question, wanted to balance, as was said, the private property interests of residents in close proximity to any proposed aerial transportation.
Okay. I'm not a representative of developer, but I would say that if we don't do this, what are the consequences for the town?
Make a
At
change.
some
If we
point
don't
in
build the aerial
time,
transit, if the
okay.
development doesn't occur,
at some point in time, you know, when it gets to these specific plans, it seems to be reasonable that you're going to allow abutters to come in and say, I don't want this next to me.
yes.
You will.
And
They
we're
can see
arguing
it all.
about here is when do
But
you
you
do
can't say
that?
that in the site.
Because, I
You
mean,
can say what you
that's,
want in a site plan, but.
that's
the
what
board
it
can't
just
move on that.
recently happened. We had a hearing on the golf course. What's important is that on the golf course, they wanted to build a storage shed. Right?
Mhm.
At some point in time, you gotta let abutters come in and say, I don't want that storage shed next to my property. You know, and they ended up with a
But
compromise.
I think we're mixing apples and oranges.
Tara's agreeing with you, Bill, but she's saying that that's
Do it
not
now.
an evaluation criteria when you get to site plan review.
You-
If it's an allowed
You
use,
have
it's
to
an
allow
allowed
them to
use.
come say it, but the
Right.
planning board can't say that's
to
not
deny.
appropriate use in
That's right.
that spot.
Yeah, but then you can negotiate with the individuals involved and saying, come up with some solution that satisfies both,
Correct.
which is what we did. You know, and then finally it got resolved to the point where both parties could agree to some set of conditions. All I'm saying is that it needs to be a right of the abutters to come in and say their piece.
Mhm.
I don't care where we do it,
But
but
they're two separate parts of what they're saying. That's that
if
issue.
you want to let them come in at this point in terms of, you know, you get a conditional use permit, but that's not site plan review at all. Now you still got to go through site plan review afterwards.
But it's set that it can be there by the time they're spending the money.
All
on the site plan.
you're saying it's an allowed use. That's all you're making a decision. It's an allowed use.
Wait.
Or
I'd
not.
be in favor of
We
making
may
a decision.
think
It's an
otherwise.
allowed use.
Yeah.
Because the abutters are gonna come to the other one.
Yes.
In our town, I know technically, if you're in a big town, you could say, you're out of order, we're not gonna let you speak. But in this town, that's not the case. They're gonna come and they're gonna complain like hell.
Even if we told them you can't speak.
Yes. That's true. But, you know, the point is that if Tim and company go away and say, the hell with this is just too much trouble. Do we win or do we lose?
I think we've lost.
Exactly.
So we just keep it as it is and allow use.
I would.
I would.
Do you see a major downside?
I think you had valid concerns about the neighboring residential.
Well, it is.
I think the downside is not allowing it in terms of the opportunity of potential development in the valley. That's where I see the risk.
Yep.
But that's just me.
I think that risk is overstated. Perhaps we just call a vote.
I'm an optimist.
Yeah.
Because it all depends on how negotiable things are when we get to the site plan stage.
Right.
Or whether property owners are.
I mean, I've certainly a lot of experience with developers saying that something's gonna be burdensome and a deal breaker. I've yet to see something like this be a deal breaker.
Yeah, this has been, as Bill and I know, this has been going on for a lot of years and kind of a dream for Waterville Valley we weren't able to build any property at the mountain, so this is the best thing, bringing the valley to the mountain, bringing the mountain to the valley. And as Bill has mentioned, it is a game changer for sure. You're gonna get people who like it, some who don't, and we have to educate them. You know, when you go to Vail and take a lift, you go over President Ford's home on a lift.
Yes, you do.
It's part of the culture, and it's a cool vibe. And I think that property owners, I think that we just have to educate them a little bit if they're going to be opposed to this. You know, but I think in the end, with you doing, I think, what's right and keeping it a use of right, that at least gets things moving in the right direction. And you're going to always have people come in and complain, but I think this is the lesser of all evils. And it's the right thing for the valley for sure, and makes the whole skiing experience and valley experience, I think it's going to be just wonderful in the future. So I think with just what I've heard here, A, you're supportive of this, and B, I think keeping the use by right is for sure the right way to go.
So I think the choices we have in front of us is to either to vote on the language that our expert crafted based on our previous comments, or to put it as a separate warrant, right? Is that, I think those are the
There's three choices.
three, and third is
Drop it,
well,
separate it, or.
accept it. Yeah, well, the first one was a double.
Drop it, separate it.
Or approve it.
Accept it.
So I mean, you could have,
I'd recommend separating it if you keep it.
so the first quote, motion should be.
Drop
should
it or
accept
separate
it,
it.
right, I can.
All right, well, I'm just gonna, this is non-binding.
Keep it,
I'm sorry, what did you say, keep it or?
keep the language that,
As a separate amendment, yeah.
So keep the change.
keep the change and go to the separate.
And talk about it next time.
And the alternative?
Yeah, just keep it as it is now.
Keep it permitted.
Yeah,
Yeah.
keep it as permanent.
Get rid of the language.
Drop the amendment.
Don't address it at all. Keep it as it is.
And
Use by right.
with in mind, you're expanding the definition from, I mean, right now it just says ski lifts, and it's gonna say ski lifts, trams, area.
Use by right.
Yeah, it's used by right.
Use by right.
See, decision was easy.
Not so easy.
So how do you address the lack of the word tram being in there then?
We're expanding the.
Okay, you're expanding the
Yeah, I'm just
definition.
dropping
Okay, all right.
T and making
Good.
it permitted.
Just wanted to make sure it was covered.
So, I got it.
Okay.
And if I forget to make the change in the table, someone will remind me.
Go get the.
Somebody move it.
So what's gonna be built, Tim? Next year?
Can you give me a copy
That's my work.
So now the boring part, you're gonna lose.
no.
I'll make you a copy of
Thank you
everything.
very
I'll
much.
actually email it.
Because I have some special civic land and that's really cool.
So this one,
Yeah, if I could get that.
do you want me to email it to you, scan it and email?
Have the hearing.
Or do you want to come
Yeah,
pick it up
if
at the
you could-
town?
You could email it to me.
Okay. Write your email next to your name and
Be
I'll
in the
put it
paper
out to you.
November 3rd. When do you need it? When do you-
If it needs to
It's
be in the
19.
paper on the 30th,
Yeah.
we need it by,
Awesome.
4 or 5 days. Well, let's get the.
It's a Friday, so,
We need
Friday,
it by that Tuesday. We need it by the Tuesday.
it's better than that.
So if you get it to us Monday.
I'll get it to you
Is
next
there
week.
something-
22nd. I got it, yeah. I'm away next week, so whatever I put off to the following week is great.
So why is Bill Caslin still here?
We'll
Well,
find
there
out.
are other issues
Right, yeah,
that
we'll find
are
out.
worth discussing.
In the zoning ordinance,
Yes.
I guess I'm not, I'm gonna get out of here pretty soon.
Okay.
Not late now.
All right, well, this won't take too long.
Okay.
Thank you for seeing me, and I support all the things that you're doing regarding zoning changes. I'm here today to talk about a lot in Moose Run. Bill was mentioning Moose Run before, and I wanted to show you the lot that I'm talking about. Right now,
Who are you?
I'm Barry Fish, sorry.
Are we still talking about zoning changes?
Well, this is, what I would like to see happen is it's presently zoned as LDR. I would like to have it be possibly considered for BC.
Would that be something?
So
we have
when we
next year?
rezoned that property up there a while ago, yours got included in LDR?
Actually, the lot I'm talking about is right here. It's this lot. This is the lot that is right next to the putting green where they have the practice green.
Right.
This is Route 49. This is the lot. This is right where you make a left to go into Town Square. If you make a right, you go up to Moose Run. That's where this lot is.
I'd be a little uneasy about adding a new thought like that in the middle of your public hearing process. As opposed to revising the amendments that are already noted for the first hearing. I recommend thinking about it for next year.
What, maybe just go on. Why do you want to do it?
Well, because right now, the lot's owned by two people. I own one half, another person owns the other half. Originally, this lot was zoned VC.
Do I need to do that?
It was originally VC, but then it was changed to LDR.
I'm late.
It's right next to these other lots that are all VC,
That are all VC.
that are all VC. It's across from the putting green.
Right. No, I'm familiar with the lot.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right now, the lots are LDR. We can't sell the lots. No one is buying the lots. We've discounted the lots. No one is buying the lots. They're sitting there. So the point that I wanted to make was if we could change it to VC, it would give us more options to possibly sell the lots and increase the density. But without that, without the change, they're gonna stay as LDR and we're gonna sit on these lots. They're just not gonna sell.
Do you own them?
I own one half, another party owns the other half.
What do they
Can
think?
somebody?
I haven't even asked them because I wanted to get your input first before I even proceeded.
Excuse me, if one person would follow up with me if there's additional changes that need to be
Based on our discussion with Bill.
or whatever.
Yeah, or whatever. He's always aware.
Yeah.
So this is my first step. If this isn't something that you think you're gonna approve or move forward with, then fine. Or if there's another time, then I'm supposed to do it. But right now, the lots aren't moving. They're not, nothing's happening.
I refresh my memory, Barry. At the point in time, I know why we changed most of Moose Run to LDR. My understanding was we only changed those lots that were in fact already had single-family homes on them.
No.
Or were buried. No?
No, it basically was based on the size of the lots.
size
if
of
they
the lot.
were, those are, if, correct me if I'm wrong, Barry, but the division created 2 half-acre lots.
That is correct. Well,
And so-
actually, the whole thing is
Well-
1.5 acres.
Yeah, so it's roughly in that half-acre
Correct.
category. So the boundary was drawn around those 2 lots because they were viewed as single-family home lots. And when we made the change at Moose Run from VC to LDR, we drew that boundary around those quote-unquote house lots.
Right.
And we excluded the lots that were 2 acres or already had multifamily dwellings on them or something like that. So, that's where that boundary came from, was that these were considered single-family house lots.
Gotcha.
So I really think this is an 11th hour change. It hasn't been noticed for the prior hearing. And really, you're holding the second hearing to rediscuss changes of things that you've already put out there for the public to see and hear. I mean, I don't have an opinion as far as is this a good idea or not, but you guys haven't talked about it in much detail either, but.
I never talked about it.
Right, you haven't discussed it yet, so.
First step, that's
Is
why
that-
I'm here, I understand all that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
That's
think
a lot.
I think we were in the middle, yeah, I think we were in the middle of this whole public hearing.
And it's also the timing.
We basically changed this about, what, 4 or 5 years ago?
Yeah, I'd have to look, but yeah, I think you're
And
right.
Barry, at that time, you didn't have any objection to it being changed?
No. Well, when I purchased the lot, it was already LDR.
Right. Oh, okay,
Yeah.
all right. So by the time you bought it, it was already LDR.
I just, I mean, I'm here because I think it's an opportunity to possibly sell the lots and have higher density and build something on it that, kind of goes along with the philosophy of what you're trying to do. It's right next to other VC lots. It's right across from where you play golf. It's right next to the golf, so it's within walking distance of everything. So it kind of bodes well for that philosophy. Plus, because right now the lots are just sitting there, and they're not going to sell. We've discounted the lots, and
I kind of suspect there may be other zoning, since we're talking about zoning in this upcoming town meeting, there might be other suggestions. Maybe it'd be worth taking up for next year. I hate to have you wait longer, but.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a crazy idea, it's just the timing,
so when
Definitely take that
would be
into
a good time to come back?
They're gonna start talking, if town meeting approves the funding, they'll start talking in April or May about the next round of
Well, in theory, we have a
changes.
public hearing next month, right? So we could start looking ahead.
Yeah, but you can't,
No, we can't make action for next year, but we could.
well, you have an amendment, a proposed amendment that has rezoning in it.
Right.
You could take these 2 lots and add that to that amendment that you already have. You can, because town council has said that he wants us to list the actual map and lot numbers for each of the lots that we're changing the zoning of. So we could add these 2 on the bottom of that list. And then it can go to the public hearing in December, and you can do with it what you want. But you can't add it in December because that's a change. It's not a
No, I meant.
wording
to
change.
Start discussing it for next year.
Yeah.
So you're saying we have to decide right now.
Right
whether
now.
we want it or not.
That's right.
And it's giving us more time to think about it.
That's
Anyone have a proposal?
How long you been stuck with these lots?
4 or 5 years.
So.
But
Well,
they were
the market
purchased as LDR. I mean, it's not-
Yeah, of course it
Yeah.
does.
Yeah,
It's
I mean, it
desperate.
wasn't- Hey, I'm just here because I see an opportunity, let's
Yeah.
face it, that's why I'm here. And I see, it kind of goes along with your philosophy that this is what you're trying to do, and it gives us the opportunity to you know, do what the philosophy of the town is, plus sell the lots, it's a win-win for both of us. That's basically, I mean, that's it.
No, you don't want to be stuck with these lots for another year.
Yeah, well, no,
Right.
they're just not selling. They're just not selling.
There are other philosophies to not make rash decisions without thinking about unintended.
I understand, I'm not, you know, this is not a conflict, this is just a, hey, what do you guys think? And, you know,
I think the concept, you know, what we've been talking about, you know, opportunity for, you know, higher density in that location, I mean, definitely makes sense. But I would agree that, you know, that to add to Mark's point of adding that to an amendment, you know, without this, you know, the scrutiny at this point could jeopardize that entire amendment.
Right, so I worry if we added it in, then everything would go if that was unacceptable and neighbors haven't been noticed or anything like that. So, you know, I just worry that if neighbors.
Well, no, they'll get noticed for the December public hearing.
Right, but.
They haven't been
but it would be
noticed
too
before.
late to make any compromises or any other changes because it's December.
You can all, well,
It'd be too late to hear their objections.
Well, no, but it would be too late to.
no, but like Rob says, are you gonna can the entire amendment? Or are you gonna, what are you gonna do with it?
And that's the reason that I think it's too late to make these changes now. It'd be better to have time, hear what neighbors have to say and make sure that that everything's fine.
how do they do that?
They will come to the public hearing and make comments.
So it won't be unchangeable. Like the last one. We'll do it earlier in the year.
So what's the next step?
April, May timeframe, if the funding for continued work on the zoning ordinance gets funded by town meeting.
Or even if it doesn't, I mean, that's something we can.
Yeah,
handle
we
without
can.
Right,
doing ourselves.
that's right.
We can
Yeah,
do it
yeah.
ourselves.
Yeah.
That'll happen.
So April, May timeframe.
So come back in April, May with the same proposal. Okay.
Yep.
Cool. So what I'm hearing is, I'm not getting the approval, but I'm sort of getting positive vibes. Is that it?
Yes.
Yeah, definitely.
Yes.
Cool. Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
I've got two areas that I'd like to comment on. One is I appreciate Bill's comments about unintended consequences because I've been the victim of unintended consequences before. But one of the things this thing does, Bill, is there is currently the right to build condominiums on these Moose Run lots,
Right.
which is really the only VC property that I think we're talking about. But as a practical matter, condominiums are not going to get built there. By reducing the lot size, you're almost approaching a freestanding condominiums. I mean, you could go in and do this today and condominiumize it, but they're all detached.
Right.
Right? But what we're doing, what your proposal is, which by the way, I really appreciate how the planning board responded to the public input and what a great job Tara did. I think that it's been a great process. But what the smaller lots do, Bill, is they let you approach condominium densities, but they're detached buildings instead of attached. It's truly that simple. And if you're going to proceed with that, which I really hope you do, because I honestly believe you can stimulate some development, maybe in the relatively short run. And I think we could all use a little new development in the valley. It would stimulate other development. But the one thing that didn't get changed that would stop that is in Article 4, Section B about the common driveways, which Bill talked about before. It currently says that these common driveways are called access ways, and we do have road definition problems riddled through our ordinance. It says you can only access 4 lots. We all think that we want to increase density more than 4. And if you look at a condominium, if you look at Windsor Hill or Village or any of these, they basically have a common access way that accesses more units or more things than 4. My suggestion is that it be changed to say common driveways serving multiple buildings or lots developed as a unified plan must be approved by the Public Safety Department. Okay, so as long as it's wide enough for the ambulances and the fire trucks and so on, that you can do that. And if I can draw a picture on your board up there, I can show you how that might work. And it might also answer some questions about how you achieve the maximum density under this scenario, and what things might look like if it came before you, but it's up to you.
So you're just taking up to 4 out?
It says up to 4. I say common driveways. I just say, I think it needs to be a unified plan.
You can't have 8 different house lots proposed, is what you're saying, right, Bill?
Yeah.
It's gotta be a plan.
Here's a plan.
Like
for-
Mountain Village South is an example. Those are individual lots
Right.
that are freestanding houses that have a single driveway going into them. I think they were developed initially as condos, but now they're individually owned.
Oh, interesting. I didn't
Yeah.
know that.
So Mountain Village South is, if you guys go up across from the school, the little development on the right, that is a place that does what Tara is talking about with, the setbacks were less, the density is a lot more than any other single family home in town. But I think it's what you might be envisioning for. I think those were examples of what condos would look like or something.
Yeah, trying to figure out how to access these smaller lots, and it's typically done in a lot of places. I had someone send me a picture of a project. Turned out I'd looked at it in Breckenridge that had all of the houses facing on a pedestrian walkway, and the access way was in the back. The garages were in the back. This property, that's the VC property that's left, would lend itself very well to that kind of development, because you've got the
Part of it, why wouldn't it then? Why do you need to have an internal road?
Can I draw you a quick picture?
Yeah, that'd be all right with me, but I mean, it would seem to me that the only thing governing lot size now is the statement that says, take the area of the buildings, right, multiply by 4, and that's the minimum lot size. Well, it basically says the maximum lot coverage for a single family or 2-family dwelling would be 25% of all buildings.
Well, that's been eliminated.
That's being eliminated.
Being eliminated in the proposal.
Yeah, in the proposed language.
So there is no requirement for the amount of space for a house, period. So then, in particular, why wouldn't you just designate it a public road?
Because a public road's gonna have to be a 50-foot right of way.
Yeah, there are requirements for the right of way.
It's like
that's the stuff that bothered, well, yeah, I would like you to draw your thing, because I think we're into a whole can of worms here.
Well,
in terms of what could technically get built.
Think Windsor Hill Village condominium, or any of these other little condominiums where you have to have a road servicing those. It's not a public road. It's an access road. It serves more than one unit, but because the buildings because it's a condominium, it doesn't fall under the regulations. All I'm asking is the same consideration be made in this. And let me just draw you a quick picture. That's all right.
Yeah.
This is Route 49, or it's not called Route 49 anymore.
Valley Road.
And here's a road. We'll just call it a road, because you don't want to look at an exact plan, but this road might be similar to Golden Heights Road, for example. And then there might be a lot over here. By the way, Barry Fisher's lot might be over here. And then you've got some other lots down here, okay? So you got Route 49 here, and you got another road that runs up through here. And you've got wetlands, you know, there's a little wetlands here, there's a little wetlands here. This thing's all wetlands over here. So, and very nicely, through good planning on your part, there's a multi-use trail that runs through there. Everybody loves pedestrianization. Pedestrianization is a really, really big deal. And this property is fairly deep. And there's no road in the back. So at one point, the planning board approved the condo project here that never got built.
The timbers or something.
It had a access way or something that came in here.
Yeah.
Well, if you came in here with a road like this, it's actually a stream down here and there's more wetlands here. But now you come in and you go, oh, look, we can put these really neat little lots right on the pedestrian walkway. We can have garages, single garages or two bed garages, so there's no future fight over that. And this has been done in other resort areas, and I have drawings of this that you can see. And these have porches on the front, maybe a little four-season thing here. The house sits here, you get a little patio, you got a garage might be attached. Very, very cool. And in my mind, they look like a mountain cottage. You know, they're a little bit smaller than people want a big house, go buy a big lot. These are smaller things. You've got a Craftsman post and beam porch on the front, so it looks good. And you want a unified plan because you don't want a red one and a green one and a blue one. You want them all to be earth toned, or you want them to have the same features. And then you get over to this piece of land and you say, okay, we got to put a driveway in here to access this. You can go on a little wetlands here, and you can do the same thing all along this path. Very, very cool development on a walkway. And then you take a look at the other things, and if you can put some other things, it might be longer if it's narrower, or up here, these might be a little different. They've got to sit up higher so you can look over the ones in the front, but you need to have a common driveway. And the driveway, we all know it's got to have a hammerhead, so there's got to be the ability to turn around, and there's got to be the ability to move snow, and the public service department's going to say, safety department says, yeah, that works for us. But what you're proposing really can stimulate some really cool development, and I think it can happen quicker rather than later.
What's on the other side of Route 49? Where are those?
Right here. This is
lots
on
look like?
C1.
That's all C1.
And that's where you've seen the plan that SE Group did. That destination hotel site ideally is right across the road from that.
Bill, so in essence, we get the benefit of a condominium development because there's a lot of property value associated with this, but they're single-family homes, which is what the market wants.
Plus, you can go finance.
Plus, you can finance.
You get approval for this thing, right?
Yeah.
You come in, you go through all the process with you. You've got a unified plan. You've got a controlling document that deals with maintaining the road and snow removal and a place where you can extend your utilities and all of that. And now you can go to the bank and you can finance
one. Yeah.
One. And you got one buyer, you got one financing, you can go do it. You know, if the problem with this project here that Jeff Brown was trying to do, the bank wanted him to sell 50% of them before they'd finance it. And after spending $120,000, they couldn't move forward. You know, this is a practical way to address market conditions, financing conditions, and create something that I think would be attractive. It's consistent with what was intended in Moose Run. It's easier to do, I think, than the half-acre lots or quarter-acre lots.
So you couldn't do this though as part of a PUD?
I don't know, Bill, I've never really.
Yeah, right. Well, there's a lot of, right. So it's a possibility that the language of PUD would allow you to do something like this.
And so the PUD is a 1 acre, right? And.
Well,
Yeah, it's
the
1.5
total
acre.
property has got to be 1 acre. What's unclear with the PUD is whether if you get the whole concept approved, can you build just one individual little thing and finance and subdivide that land? That to me has never been clear in the PUD.
Well, there's a learning process in a PUD
Yeah.
for you and
Yeah.
for me or
Right.
the owner of this property. There's no question about that. And
Who is the owner of the property?
the Waterville Company owns this property right now.
I have a question on the road, the access road.
These little things here,
Yeah, are they gonna be public, private?
well, I'd love to make it public if the town would want it. But by and large, the town does not take these little roads that are in condo developments. I would propose that this road would be maintained over the long run by
An association.
homeowners
Why
association.
does the town want it public? Cost?
There's many issues.
And size.
It's not a through road, it's not, you're talking about, it's not gonna be as wide as our other public roads.
Why didn't we do the public road up in Moose Run? Why is that private?
Because it's a driveway,
It's a driveway because the lots there were measured to the
I
center
know,
of
but
the road.
I don't.
Here's the reason.
No,
Otherwise,
here's-
you couldn't get, yeah, no.
We got more lots and we got more density by availing ourselves of the access road than we would have otherwise. It's a
And he was able
developer
to
manipulation of your
Of the
regulations. But
right.
it got a
more
higher
density, that's right. And it, it actually can service 10 lots because each half of the circle, 8
Four,
lots
one way, four
for going each way around the circle.
And the
And
town-
they're considered driveways, they're not built to the specifications that we require for public roads.
And we're okay with that.
Well,
The town's okay with that.
Yeah.
The planning board's okay with that.
It approved.
we approved it. It's an internal road, it's a private road.
It
It's
approved that
maintained by the,
that subdivision.
And you like that, you're okay with that.
No, I think it's stupid, but,
Okay, good.
but
My point,
personally,
that's all I wanted.
but he's right, and this is my concern with doing anything in this area. You have to understand that developers are going to read the letter of the law.
Yeah.
And will take advantage of the letter of the law. So stuff that seems to be stupid, like, well, nobody would ever take a 1/4 acre on rec land and subdivide it and call it a park and then build a caretaker's cottage. Well, yes, they will.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you don't prevent something like that, they'll do stuff like that. Absolutely. That's the real world.
The interesting thing is about zoning is you can't make somebody do something.
Right.
All right. The zoning, you can't make somebody go do it, but you can stop developers from doing certain things. That's just the nature of the beast.
so do you want to make this language change? Do you want Tara to include this language change?
Let me give you a caveat because
Okay.
I just mentioned to Tara
Okay.
that I was going to talk to you about this.
Okay.
And she said, tell them I'm not in favor of that language change relative to the driveways. And her concern is all the different wording and descriptions we've got of different class roads and access ways and all of that stuff. And I think you should talk to Tara about it. You should say subject to talking to Tara. I think it's important that this access way or driveway is part of a unified plan. I think that's critical. And I think that there has to be provisions for long-term management and maintenance of that road. And maybe that goes in there too. But Tara was not in favor of that change.
What, did you guys talk about creating another type of access way? It's not a private driveway or a common driveway or something. third.
She was late, so we didn't have a chance to discuss that, but you should definitely talk to her about that. But I can tell you, from my point of view, that if you make the density changes without the driveway change, it is of no consequence, because you have to have one or you don't get the other. Either that, or you put two 50-foot road right-of-ways across the back of it and give it to the town, and you lose density. That's the alternative. The advantage is we really only have three lots, or if you add Barry's lot, you're not talking about a lot of property. We can really look at what the scenario is for each one of these. And as you look at minimum densities, as you move forward, keep in mind that you've got wetlands, you've got multi-use paths and stuff that really impact your ability to increase those densities beyond a certain point. If it was all flat and no wetlands, well, then you can say, okay, your minimum density is going to be 8 an acre or 6 an acre, or whatever you want to be, and you can go do that. But on this particular land, there's a lot of, it's highly compromised with wetlands and paths and so on. So thank you for letting me draw the picture and speak, and thank you again for the effort you've made. I think it's all been good. You've done a great job.
Regarding this, I didn't get some clarity, and maybe I read something wrong here that Tara sent out. But she's proposing just to eliminate this one sentence, right? In the zoning? Under Article 4, where it talks about the minimum lot size for a single-family home is 20, she's saying, we'll take that sentence out. But all the other sentences stay in. Because, like B, I'm reading the zoning. That's what it's unclear to me. I need virtually a listing of not what she's taken out, but what the new one would look like. Or otherwise, it's very hard to figure this stuff out. I mean,
do you have her stuff? With
I do
additions
have
and
her
deletions?
stuff. Yeah, but my interpretation is she's just taken out that one sentence, and everything else stays in. Or am I reading that wrong?
Which amendment you talking about, Bill?
Amendment 4, under Article 4, the second part of Amendment 3, which is now going to make a separate sentence. Was she just talking about taking that one sentence out and leaving everything else in the zoning as it is?
Yeah, I interpreted it as a take out that sentence and put this one in its place.
Right.
That's what I think it means.
Well, in that case, she's just eliminating.
Eliminate it, yes.
But she's not eliminating any other word.
I don't think so. No, I didn't think that.
3B, 2I. The following section would be eliminated, the following sentence would be eliminated.
See, I don't want to come back to this, but like B, right below this sentence, I'm reading from the zoning. There's a sentence that's called lot coverage. And it says the maximum lot coverage for a single family or two-family dwelling is 25% of all buildings. So that becomes your new minimum
So
lot
she's
size.
eliminating that.
Why? She doesn't say it here.
Yeah.
No, she's just saying the minimum zoning would be this. The part B stays. I need a document that what basically, what is the new one look like? Or otherwise I'm gonna get thoroughly confused as I am right now. You're saying she's taking it out. I don't interpret that she's taking it out.
5A and 5B are both being eliminated.
All right, but everything else stays. So the building height restrictions stay.
I think we decided to pass on that, didn't we?
So you could have, one of these buildings could be 35 feet high that he's building in here.
Right.
I have to think about that. I'm not sure that that's such a good idea. I think it's a good idea to increase density, but I'm not so sure that we ought to just eliminate everything else. Keep everything else the same. That's my only point. Has anybody really looked at this?
Yeah, well, what do you see as, I mean, so say there's.
30, I would not want a 35-foot high building in his little drawing he just came up with. I wouldn't want one of those buildings to be 35 feet high.
That's 3 stories.
Yeah,
Yeah, a little more.
3-story building.
Why not?
Yeah, why?
Because I think it would be unsightly.
Built into a hill.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think, in my concept, they wouldn't be higher than 2 stories.
Right.
I would agree with that.
Well, anyway.
Although the ones in the back, Bill.
So the only thing she's eliminating is 1 and B. Everything else stays the same.
That's my way.
I'm trying to find it.
All right.
And Bill, the units in the back might need to be bigger because you'd want them to look over the ones in the front, and they'd probably have a garage below and the living area up above, so.
You want to capture the view from those units going across the
Yeah,
pond to
yeah.
the
Well,
town
and you
square.
got units in front of you, and it's a tight development. In your condominiums, Bill, if it was a condominium, the Jeff Brown project you approved, if you build a condo, then you can go 30.
Right.
I mean,
I
don't know, it's a difficult.
I now understand exactly what she's proposing to do, and I'm gonna go back and read all of the rest of the rules now and see whether I think they still apply or not apply. You know, because your point is you go into the parking and, you know, and there's references and all of this stuff back and forth.
Yep, yeah, I agree.
You know?
Well, if she sends us the electronic version, you can just click accept all changes and then read it like it would read. All the changes were accepted.
Well, can I make a suggestion? And maybe I'm out of order, because you've got, I think you're very, very close to this being very good. And I've been studying it a lot for the last 2 months or whatever. My suggestion would be that you move it to the public hearing, because it's a lot easier to take it out of the public hearing or add something then. You know, you have the ability to do that. Adding something after that becomes.
It's impossible.
Yeah, so.
Right, you run into a problem that you cannot change the intent after the next meeting.
So I'd suggest you, as Bill thinks about it, and his input's gonna be invaluable to you, because he does a good job reading this stuff, but you can eliminate it in the December public hearing.
That's the idea.
Yeah, we're carrying this forward as a separate amendment. So,
For us
so
to
it'll
comment
be
on it
right, so it'll be a
before we meet again.
separate conceptual idea. So if we decide to remove it, everything else will still stay. So I think we're safe just thinking about it and talking about it next time.
Can you deal with the driveway, the access driveway issue is critical though.
Yeah, it goes hand in hand.
And Tara may have good input on that. And I'm happy to, if she's got some time, explain what I think the concept is and how it works to her, if you'd like me to. She's your consultant, not mine.
We asked Mark to email her about how to address allowing access to what we're doing for creating the trees elimination.
Right, so that's under amendment for number 5B.
Add the language.
Exactly.
Which one?
Amendment 4.
The driveway issue?
Amendment for 5B, common driveways.
Yes.
Up to 4 multiple buildings.
You want to add that language?
Or
That's where you want to make a change, right?
Yeah, I had previously submitted, I think you have a copy of it, it says common driveways serving multiple buildings or lots developed as a unified plan must be approved by the Public Safety Department. My suggestion would be to expand that and say provisions must be made for long-term management and maintenance of the driveway.
or if there's a third access way to be created, you know, if she didn't like the language change for common driveways, and there's another way that she would approach it. Because if we're wanting to increase density, we do have to allow access. So you can't allow
You think they're type of driveway?
access way. Or how we should recommend, because we will have a problem if we go forward with high density and only allowing access to 4 buildings. What's the point of having high density?
Alright, well, we can certainly pull this out as a separate issue, as a separate amendment. And then ask Derek to work on separate language, and we can talk about it next time.
Well, we'd have to talk if you presented next time.
So we need to decide on the language now. Can we just use Bill's language?
And then that is a suggestion unless you guys do.
Unless Tara has other languages, she can send it around.
Yes.
Did you get that?
No, and I don't have anything that he sent that states that issue.
These are some comments that I made called additional comments on proposed zoning changes, 9/19/18 draft, which I revised on October 4th. And you can have this if you'd like it.
Okay. And there's a, where's the spot? Yeah, we need to see where the language is for this one that they're looking at, right in here? Okay.
I mean, this is what Tara said she was not in favor of.
Right.
We haven't had a chance to
Yes,
discuss it with her.
and, you know, you definitely need to weigh in on what she thinks.
So it's really section 5, access ways. So we'll ask that that be a separate amendment, so we can talk about that.
Oh.
We need to vote on that.
No.
So did you get that, that
Mhm.
section 5 access ways is gonna be a separate amendment, if there are language that
Yep.
you can send out to us?
Okay. I'll do it on a mass email so everyone is included in what I'm gonna send to Tara so we can figure it out.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other public comments? Why don't we go back to the minutes then?
Thank you all very much. You're doing good work, I think.
Thank you. I'll be back. I'll be back.
Yeah. We start with
The minutes?
October 11th, yeah, the minutes.
Yeah, on October 11th, I just have a couple quick, they really just stylistic grammar changes. Line 28. I think we need to, let me show you the right one here. That these are changes that were made to, zone changes that were proposed to be made to the zoning ordinance and to the planning board to address their concerns. And in, well, on line 43, you don't need the word for, e.g. stands for example. So you have, if there's a desire to allow dwellings, you can put just e.g. caretaker or management apartment as accessory use. Or you can write for example, either one. Get rid of it. That's all I have.
Any other comments, Dr. Villa? I guess on 64, I see if any and what changes are going to take.
Good enough to say.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. It just needs to be changed, 63 to 64.
What do you want it to say?
Let's see.
Do you want it to be and see if any changes?
See what changes.
What changes that they are going to take into effect? That are going to take into effect. Let's see. Has taken all questions. Should be Tara Bamford has taken all questions, plural, on 62, and concerns that were discussed at the public hearing. You can put a period right there.
Okay.
Then you can just go with she will discuss with the planning board. 2C, if any, 2C, if the planning board, right? Indeed. Has any changes, they, get rid of that, they're going to, I'm sorry, get rid of that, keep that are going to take effect. Take effect. And put a period there.
How about she will discuss changes with the planning board in a special meeting on October 18th?
Yeah.
That makes it simple. Yep, because it's implied.
We will discuss changes with the planning board at a special meeting on October 18th. Any other comments?
Okay. Have we moved to the 18th?
You haven't voted.
Actually, should we vote to?
Oh, that's right, I'm sorry.
Move to accept the minutes as amended? I'll make that motion. Second?
Second.
Great. October 18th minutes?
I have a few changes. Line 28, Tara and the planning board. You get board.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. Line 41, again, the same issue. Either say, for example, or e.g. Get rid of the for or get rid of e.g. in that example. And line 72, you're missing a closing bracket, I believe.
I'll look because actually all of these were taken from Tara's for what's me and her went over what's going to actually get put in the paper.
Right.
So.
It's just a missing bracket though.
Okay.
Because it has something bracketed, but not open bracket, but no closing bracket.
Where was that? Just so I.
Line 72 to 74.
Okay.
We're actually 71 also.
Oh, yeah.
So open and
Yeah.
no close.
No closed bracket. I mean, it's a minor, it's no question. It's not worth worrying about. Just noticed as I was reading it.
I'll just get rid of the brackets.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure what their
Take them out
purpose
all
was.
together.
Okay.
Perhaps in line 80, I think 0 feet. Or just no setback. Just no setback. They have no setback.
No setback.
I think that.
Okay.
'92. Bill C, landowner, is mainly concerned about contractor yard storage units.
Where are you? I'm not reading
92.
what. Yep, 92.
Bill C, landowner representative, is mainly concerned about contractor yards and storage units. I don't know, 93 would make more sense if the he were in front of indicated. He indicated he may be able to support these being added to.
Any other comments? Motion to accept the minutes as amended,
So move.
second,
I'll second.
all agree?
Aye.
Um, Committee report?
Yeah, the town support group, moving forward, our last meeting was regarding the icons that will be hanging under the sign.
The illegal sign.
Was that
The illegal sign.
the illegal sign?
Oh, God.
Forest Service line.
It's not though.
It is. You
That
haven't
didn't
heard.
come up when we met 2 days ago.
Really? The contractor built it on Forest Service land?
Well,
Partially?
our map is, doesn't
Our map
match.
is wrong.
Our map doesn't match the National Forest
Does the
Service.
Forest Service map, did the Forest
40 years
Service think that it's on their property?
Oh, they're certain.
They're certain that it is.
Oh,
And we
you
have,
mentioned
yeah,
us? No.
there was a
Nice
meeting
communication.
concerning, real estate representative from the Forest Service.
Well,
What's the down? No.
Right now, the solution that the, Board of Selectmen are looking at, is to, apply for and we will be granted a special permit, a yearly special permit for the sign. Or special use permit, I should say. And, hopefully, National Forest Service representatives, thought that that was doable. And then beyond that, looking at, perhaps purchasing that property. They said that they would be interested in selling that parcel of
Yeah,
land.
they've always been interested in selling that corner
Yeah,
parcel.
For a reason.
yeah. We're trying
Well-
to rate a commercial at whatever it was last time. Someone
Trying
got
to make a swap, but they didn't want to do it.
No, because the property that we wanted to swap wasn't worth, it wasn't even close in value according to their assessment.
Oh, there are things they would swap it for, but,
Yeah,
you
no,
don't want to
We
swap
didn't
it.
want to swap it. But any event, yeah, there's an issue with, you may want to, if you haven't heard, Mark can give you, I was not at the meeting, but Mark can give you all the,
When was this meeting?
a few days ago. I heard about it first time Tuesday when I was at the polls. Mark mentioned it to me.
But they haven't put a hold on the construction.
No, we're going ahead.
Yeah.
When we've applied for a special use permit, there's also state involvement in this because that land was given to us by the state when, what was it, 1980 something?
When they gave us a road?
When they gave us the road, and we assumed that a certain right of way of 132,
Yeah.
but it's actually only 49 and a half, and that little extra part is some kind of easement that legally should not have gone along with the Department of
Wow.
State's gifting us the land, however you want, whatever the proper terminology is.
Yeah.
So,
I've never seen that agreement. I mean, when we agreed to take over Route 49.
yeah,
You know?
but it's reflected on all our maps.
Right, and we
Right.
own the land, but you're saying
Right.
we don't own the land.
But the Forest Service
We
said,
just own the road.
no. And all of the sign itself apparently is in Forest Service, National Forest Service.
Really?
100% of the sign?
The sign.
We have no right of way?
We do, but we didn't, the right of way is more narrow than we thought we had, as I understand it.
So there go the bicycle, the expanded bicycle path on one side
Yeah.
anyway.
I check with Mark and make sure I'm relating this correctly, but I haven't thought about any of the consequences about it, other than, can we still build the damn thing? Can we still build the sign? And the answer is yes, but we're waiting for the final word from the National Forest Service. who apparently is willing to grant us a special use permit, a yearly special use permit.
That hasn't slowed down our.
I did not hear that, no. I did not hear that. Slow down. Any construction.
Well, good to know.
Yeah.
So yes, and then we're meeting in shortly to discuss our plans for next year. We want to focus on the trails kind of radiating out from the town square. We're bringing in extra people. Again, you can work with the rec, Betsy with the concierge and town store, just to have an idea of what guests are having issues with and what we should really be focusing on. Relatively smaller, bit of the projects that this is important.
The public, the PR announcement that the Waterville Valley Resort purchased or will purchase.
There's a PNS agreement.
And what are they purchasing?
From the Waterville Valley Company land.
Most of the land that they own.
Oh, so there's a proposal to sell all of the remaining property in town.
Almost all.
With the exception of that.
85%. Well, I don't know for sure.
Well, he said he still owns it, well.
Yeah, well, but it's a
Wow.
PNS agreement that is
Yes.
is going to be signed, I think, looking at January, February. Going to closing on it.
Okay.
It didn't specify the news announcement, the public announcement did not specify parcels of land. But I just, you heard 85%?
That's what I heard.
Yeah, I just heard the majority.
Yeah.
So that would seem to, I believe that that area that's classified as rec along the river below High Country.
Right.
Is not part of the. Not
Right,
part of
that's
the
a
sale.
floodplain down there anyway. Yeah.
So no one would want to buy it, right?
Well, I honestly think the town should consider the
Yeah.
possibility of, because it's exempt from its own regulations, so you could build playing fields and stuff down
That's
there.
right.
You can create playing fields
Yeah,
down there,
and
and
that's
not have to worry so much about the flood,
Right.
you know.
And I think that's one of the ideas. I know Tom Gross has talked about getting those sorts of fields in here for summer
Yeah.
camps, athletic camps, soccer camps,
Yes.
what have you.
He wants to run soccer tournaments.
Yeah, well. But, yeah, that's,
Are the land at the agreement already?
I just heard there was all I've seen was the announcement that it was, a PNS had been signed.
Any other communications?
Nope.
Oh, John?
So I think it's time we let the record show that I am ex officio for the Conservation Committee.
Oh, it's you there? Oh,
I've been this for months.
I didn't know. I
Right.
know.
Yeah. but
Did you know?
I don't think anyone knew.
Yeah.
Never, it's never
So
even
I haven't gone there for months now. And
Yeah.
So the report is, the good news is they've been having these meetings monthly now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so they're really well-organized group, they're really serious, so it's very good.
You were cracking the whip.
What do they want to accomplish?
Here it is,
Secretary, yeah.
everything possible. Dan Newton is an alternate, he got on board.
Right.
So that's really great news. So as they continue, I'll report more information, but they're really starting to get very well organized. So hang in there. But just so that every meeting we have now, I should, like yourself, I should be reporting something as an ex officio.
For the conservation,
Just for-
correct? Okay.
Nothing to report.
So I can put you on there.
Yeah.
All right. Well, if that's everything, do I hear a motion to adjourn? I'll make a motion.
Yeah.
Second?
Second.
All agree?
Property here.
It's the,
So, you know, there's overpass, there's is that one lane bridge. And his, we remember, this, all this property is. And it's separate. So we walk.
Oh, don't worry about it, nobody's gonna do this, not that
Yeah. Yeah, so I built something. Yeah. So this is all this, I remember Helen and I